Since we're here, I'm going to use this opportunity to share some awesome niche fragrances with you guys. They're all available at Max Roma, who is a discount website that you are probably well familiar with. You've probably placed orders from them, as have I in the past. They've got some great prices on a huge selection of designer niche fragrances. They're always expanding. They run great sales. They have some awesome rewards programs to earn your loyalty, which I highly recommend looking into because it can really pay off if you are a frequent shopper. But first, I'll need to fulfill the promise of this video. Are you a niche fragrance snob? Let's talk about it. I'm going to draw a line between mainstream / designer perfumery and niche perfumery. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but it is what I believe to be a keen and informed observation that I have seen and experienced in my several years as a fragrance enthusiast. In essence, designer perfumery today is us being told this is what you should wear, while niche perfumery is us being told this is what you could smell like. There is a greater aspect of what I would call industrial control in mainstream perfumery, especially when gendering is involved. A brand's opinion of what a man or a woman should smell like is clearly expressed in every new fragrance release. And I can attest to this as a guy years and years ago before I was ever into fragrance. You walk into a fragrance store and you need help. It's like, hey, what should I wear? What should I reach for? What should I consider? And the sales associate is usually there to help guide us because they have a little bit more knowledge than we do at that point in time. And we are essentially being told what to wear. Imagine if you did that with your clothing every day. Going on Google and saying, should I wear a t-shirt to work today? Silly, right? But that's what it is. Now, I believe that niche perfumery is all about discovery. We are invited to allow scent to take us on a journey to activate other senses outside of just the smell in order to tell us a story, paint a picture, and ultimately teach us more about ourselves. Now let's get into these 3 signs that you might be a niche snob. In my opinion, and this is just my formulation of things, so don't take this as definitive evidence, but I think you need all 3 of these attributes intact in order to be considered a niche snob. Now, some of you might relate to all 3 of these and thus find it an accomplishment to be considered a niche snob, and that's fine. I'm not trying to say being one way or the other is good or bad, but it is good to just have self-awareness. Sign number 1 that you might be a niche fragrance snob: you find yourself completely apathetic to new designer releases. I can relate to this. Now, I have been surprised from time to time when I've gone out of my way to try something, but generally I'm not paying attention to the designer market. When something is announced, some new flanker, some elixir that, parfum that, I don't really care to investigate. I might hear and receive some opinions as people start to try whatever fragrance it is, but I'm in no rush to go out and see for myself. There is no FOMO for me at all. But if I happen to come across it conveniently, I'll check it out, and if I love it, then I love it. A real quick addendum to this, I do actually keep my eye on a few select designer brands that do what I love, namely Cartier, Hermes, Brioni. I'm liking what they're doing. There's a few brands out there that have my attention, but that's it. Sign number 2 that you might be a niche fragrance snob: you primarily seek to wear unique and artistic perfumes strictly for your enjoyment. You're not concerned with what anyone else thinks. You're not concerned with pleasing the masses. You may not even be concerned with displeasing the masses. As long as you love what you got on, then you are walking your walk. Now, I can relate to this. The majority of my fragrance wearing is for me first. My wife comes second in terms of what I'm wearing for, because I do consider her, but in terms of everything outside of my 4 walls and my wife's opinion, I don't care. As long as I'm happy and confident with my scent, I will exude myself with confidence in the world. And that doesn't mean people will compliment me, but that does mean that I have a better chance of whatever the heck I have on actually supplementing and matching my presence in the room. So it could be a very off-the-wall niche fragrance, but if I'm walking around with confidence, and if I didn't overspray it so that it's not the only thing people around me can smell, I think it really has a positive effect. And sign number 3 that you might be a niche fragrance snob: you judge others overtly or covertly who only express interest in mainstream fragrances. I do not relate to this. No matter what I like, no matter what I don't like, the one thing I try to keep away from myself is saying, I cannot believe you don't like niche fragrances, or I can't believe you only like designer fragrances. When you start pointing fingers at people, that's where the line is drawn. Taste is subjective, that should go without saying, so not understanding or being offended or feeling the need to express opposition to someone actually truly, sincerely liking what they like and wearing it for themselves. Being opposed to that makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense for me to say, I don't agree that you like that fragrance. It doesn't matter if I agree or not, because it's not a matter of debate. Do you relate to this? Have you ever found yourself judging people based on their taste? Again, I don't personally relate, so I don't consider myself a niche snob. Maybe you could call me a 2/3 niche snob, whatever it is. But as long as we can say what we have to say without keeping other people from doing the same, I think we're doing good. Now, I do want to briefly speak to the other side of the coin, what some people might call being a designer snob. I do believe this is a misconception, and here's why. Most, not all, but most people who say that niche perfumes are not worth experiencing usually have not actually tried niche perfumes. Maybe Creed, Parfum de Marly, Bond No. 9 at best. I don't really consider those niche in comparison to some other brands and in the creations that they have. Those are more mainstream luxury brands. A lot of these people are simply and understandably put off by the price of these fragrances. That is the barrier of entry for most people. It's almost exclusively that, because if they're not going to try it, then they don't know what it smells like. So then they're going to pass a judgment and say, I wouldn't pay that price for a fragrance when I can get my fragrances for $60 or less and know I smell good. Again, that's fine. But if you haven't tried niche perfumery, you have no perspective to speak from. And thus it is kind of foolish to write off the entire idea of niche perfumery even though you haven't tried it. Now, those who find themselves diving into niche perfumery usually have a past of navigating mainstream perfumery. I can attest to this. I started with designer fragrances, as I'm sure many of you did too. And you get to a point where you realize that you're just looking for more. You're unfulfilled with each new designer fragrance that you try. They all start to kind of blend together into a gray blob. Things start to smell the same. Therefore, their opinion is formed through perspective of having experience on the other side of the fence, the mainstream side. Now, this is not to say that their perspective is more valid, but it is more informed. So all that to say, the TLDR version, you can't knock it till you try it. As promised, I'm going to get into a few fragrances. I just have 5 here that I really love. They're available at Max Aroma. I'm going to talk about them briefly. There's going to be a link down below to try them. I want to hear your opinions on them if you've tried them, and then we'll be on our way. First one up here is from Amouage, and it's Boundless. Perfumed by Karine Vinchon, who has done several fragrances from the house. And Boundless, oh my gosh. This is a spicy bourbon vanilla with a ton of blood orange up top. There's this juicy, citrusy quality that is not necessarily fresh and bright. It is so spicy. And the vanilla here is not an edible vanilla, and it's backed by woods and tobacco. There's a dark roughness here. There's a very subtle sweetness here. It is shrouded in spices and made a little bit, again, fruity, but not overly sweet or bright by way of that blood orange. Such a unique composition. One I highly recommend checking out. Would be great for the fall time, not my first pick for summer, but maybe try it before fall comes around. That is Amouage Boundless. From the house of Sospiro. This is called Pasticcio. Now, this is one of the few fragrances that Sospiro has released within the past couple years that I actually appreciate and respect. The others that I've smelled smell like other things. They smell like bona fide luxury clones. But this actually has a little bit more going for it. Granted, it does still remind me of a mix of other things. To me, this smells like a somewhat blend of BDK Gris Charnel with a little bit of Parfum de Marly Pegasus. If you look at the note breakdown, you might be very confused and put off because you're going to see a ton of florals. And if I'm not mistaken, pasticcio means mess. So you look at the note breakdown and like, this looks like a mess. So aptly named, but it comes across very cohesive, very beautiful. It's kind of a powdery, fresh floral, musky scent with this almost cottony, creamy vanilla feel. Almost that almond metallic vanilla feel that you get from Pegasus, but with the musky floral touch, almost the illusion of fig that you get out of Gris Charnel. It smells beautiful, ultimately comes together as its own thing, has a beautiful air around it when you wear it. It smells amazing around you, has great performance if you're looking for that. Very, very posh, very elegant, but you do have to appreciate a little bit of a powdery scent. But all that being said, I think it's actually a little bit more masculine than it is unisex. One to check out, that is Pasticcio from Sospiro. This is a very complex fragrance. It smells so unique, but it's so beautiful on the skin. The way it develops, it changes, it evolves. Paper doesn't do it justice, but it still smells wonderful here. From Blackcliff Parfums, they call this Immanence. There is so much going on in here. This is spicy, a little bit bright and citrusy, a little bit smoky in its woody quality. There's a little bit of a booziness in here. It gets ashy, resinous. There's so much going on here. If you look at the note breakdown, you're not really gonna get a good idea of what the heck this smells like. But overall, I would describe this as this slightly sticky, resinous, smoky, woody fragrance with a little bit of a warm, sweet booziness and a lot of spices surrounding it. I think there's even a touch of pineapple in here that comes out a little bit more in the skin. It gives it a nice fruity pop, but it is tucked away and it doesn't last too long. But I love the scent when you spray it. I love it even more as it dries. This is one to check out for sure. The house has some of the most unique offerings I've smelled in some time, but this is one of their newer ones. They call it, once again, Immanence. This is from Alghabra Parfum. They call it Labyrinth of Spices. Name is perfect here. Talking about a lot of spicy fragrances. Didn't realize that. Oh my gosh. If you like Killian Intoxicated, this is kind of in that vein, but honestly more complex, a lot more layers here, and honestly a little bit more definitive, I would say. At least for me, it has a more distinctive personality, even though it is a more complex blend. Almost every spice you can think of is in here. Cardamom is pretty heavy. There's nutmeg in here. There's some tobacco and coffee. All in all, this is a sexy fragrance. Warm, a little rough, but very approachable and very powerful. You don't need much of this, but this is a great scent for a night out when it's a little bit cool. This is an attention getter. Do check this one out, guys. Can't believe this one's not talked about more. And the final fragrance we're talking about today is from Pantheon, Roma. They call this Raffaello, in homage to Raffaello, the artist himself. Another very powerful fragrance. This is one of those fragrances that is very simple, but smells like nothing else I've really tried. It's honestly kind of hard to describe. It is mostly woody. It's dry woody. There's almost this fresh balsamic feel. I think tonka bean is what makes it pretty sweet. And I think one of the most unusual aspects of the scent is the wormwood, which gives it this sharp herbal quality. A little bit bitter, very plant-like, but blended so well with that wood that dries it out, gives it a hefty base, a touch of that tonka bean sweetness to give it an approachability. Elegant, but different, very artistic. If you're an artistic type, this might be a great signature for you, but not one you need to spray a lot of because it's so strong. Raffaello from Pantheon, Roma. I want to know your thoughts on this whole idea of how we interface with mainstream / designer perfumery versus niche perfumery. What is your experience? Do you consider yourself a snob? Have you tried a niche fragrance that completely traumatized you? Or have you been too afraid to take the plunge and thus you don't plan on doing it ever? All opinions and experiences are welcome. And again, link down below to Max Roma. Check them out to check out all these fragrances. Thank you so much for tuning in. Peace. I'll see you in the next one.